So it turns out then the champion system, a system that actually looked pretty simple on the surface, is actually a lot more complicated than we first believed it to actually be. We had the blog post last night, we're going to run over that in this video. It gives us a lot more information about how stats actually work in the game, and this blog post lets us know that the worst fears that we had about the champion system and how it works, they're all completely true, if not even worse than we actually believed it to be in the first instance. So I will say this video is a pretty complicated one. I've been on Discord all day with quite a few of the guys working through the numbers on this, and my head is ready to explode, so do bear with me while we run through all this. Just some points before we do go into what we will be covering. I've mentioned the system is worse than we actually expected. Personally, I do feel that we've been misled over the system. The way it was talked about with the damage numbers certainly sound a lot more effective than the damage numbers we will be getting on many of the nodes. We need a respec system ASAP for that reason, that we have been misled over the stats, and also so many of the nodes are just massively unbalanced. You have about 3 nodes out of 12 that I would say that are must-haves, so that's 75% of the system I would say you can potentially just ignore. Now, the areas we'll be covering in this video anyway. Firstly, we'll run over the blog post to give some context on that. We'll then run over the math. This is a really fun bit. After that, I've got a nice simple infographic where basically I rate all the different nodes from 1 to 5 stars. So if you want to keep it nice and simple, you can jump to that section. And then at the end, I'll give some possible solutions to fixing this as well. Now, before we do go in and run over the blog post, huge thanks to Pingu Paul, Crix, Lexan, Chris Benar, T White Ninja, Scurf Fletcher, and also Grim here. They've been helping all day on Discord to actually figure this all out. Now, before we do jump in as well, if you're enjoying the content, if this is helpful, take the time to hit the like, share and subscribe button. Feel free to call me Tony Bing Bong and tell me some of the numbers in the comments below, because it actually helps engagement as well. Now, with that all out of the way, let's jump in and let's break this down. So we've got the blog post first. I'll try and run through this nice and quick. So we wanted to clarify how the champion skill points work to explain why it appears to be broken. That first line is a massive red flag. If it appears to be broken to players, then that says in a way that it is actually broken. It's not working as they believe it should be working. So that's a huge red flag straight away. And next up here, the TLDR, and it's quite a long TLDR to be honest, and this again is a red flag. If it's this hard to explain the system, then it's not intuitive to use. But the TLDR is that the champion system increases the amount of bonus percent used to modify damage, willpower, etc. It does not multiply the amount of bonus. We found out a lot of how stats actually work from this. Now, it states we'll be updating our in-game UI messaging to make this distinction clearer. They don't need to update the UI, they need to actually tune a lot of these nodes to make them more useful. Next, it states here, to get into the details, the difference between expectation and reality is based on additive versus, I'll struggle to say this, multiplicative, yep, I struggled to say that, scaling of bonuses. In the game, the amount of damage you do, how much willpower you have, how often you dodge attacks, how much damage enemies done to you, yeah, we get the point, are all impacted by various bonus modifiers. For example, your raw damage output might have bonuses from your gear, your abilities, what comics you've collected, and dozens of other behind the scenes elements. Now, breaking this down, it says, let's pretend that your current multiplier rating is 1000%, which is in the neighbourhood of where these are these days. And in a moment, I'll actually show you where you can check that multiplier. It's actually been in front of our face the whole time, as much as we didn't realise this, which is really pretty crazy. But for this example, it's 1000%. So you attack an enemy, let's say that attack would do 2300 damage, but with the multiplier you do 23,000 damage. So that's 2300 times 1000%. Then you unlock the champion skill point that gives you a bonus of 3% damage. Your expectation, and this appeared to be everyone's expectation, your expectation might be that your next hit will give you 23,000 times 103 damage, or 103%, which would be 23,690. But instead it ends up being 23,069, so that's only a tenth of what, by their own definition, they're actually saying players expected to get. So the calculation of that is 2,300 times 1,003%, and that gives you the the extra 69 damage that they're adding on there. Instead of multiplying your current damage by 3%, the additional 3% damage from the champion skill was added to the 1000% underlying bonus to make it 1003. That's how, when a lot of the math we've been doing, the numbers for your 3% damage bonuses were coming out in the region of about 0.25, 0.3% for that reason there. States we're working on ways to improve for this as communicated in game, but we want to clarify that the system is working as intended and that the bonuses will add up to you being quite a bit stronger over time. No, they won't. That's just simply not true. The way this actually works, and this is going to be really hard to explain, I may not do a great job of it, but the way this works is as we actually gain more to that base percentage, the 1000% in this instance, the net gains that we'll get overall from the champion system will actually feel like they are less, or they'll actually look to be less. So the stronger we get in a roundabout way, your net gains are actually less. So yeah, not a good start at all here. That's a blog post. Let me just jump into the stat sheet to show you where you get this multiplier from. So from what we can tell then, we don't have the multiplier for the willpower, how that's calculated unfortunately, but we do have the multipliers for your melee and your ranged damage, and it's, as mentioned, it was straight in front of our face the whole time. So you can see this is Miss Marvel I've got in the moment. The right hand side of melee damage, it says 1308. That is the multiplier, and that's why when you would unlock, for example, your melee damage node, which was adding on 3%, that would then jump up 3 points, because that technically in a way should have a percentage next to it, because that is your base multiplier. You can see for our range damage, because I'm not focusing in on that, it is much lower. So the range multiplier at the moment is 671. And if I was to put a point into that, I would go up to 674. So that actually means that the gains, this extra 3% you get, they will feel higher on stats that are actually lower. So if you invest in a stat you've already got a high multiplier on, it will feel like you're getting smaller gains on it because the stat's already higher up. So I hope you're following me so far, because this is where we're really going to jump into the heavy math now. So let's bring up some more details here. So this section here is going to be pretty heavy going. I'm not a math guy myself, so I actually struggle with this a lot, but I feel it's important we show the math, how this actually works, so people that are wanting to get an understanding of it are able to do that. If this is too much for you, and I don't blame you if it is, because it's honestly too much for me, but if it is, I'll put a timestamp on screen now and you can jump to the section that's nice and easy. It's more Macana style, where it just rates all the different nodes from 1 to 5 stars. So timestamp on screen for that now. Let's jump in and break this down. Once again, bear with me as we go through this, because this is a struggle. So if we start off here on the left for combat, so we've got melee damage, and this is based on Miss Marvel, who we looked at a moment ago, and what I've done is I've simplified it by having your melee base damage on the attack she was doing in this instance being 1000. So we could see back on the previous page that our melee damage rating was shown as 1308. So that's the multiplier. So in that instance, if your base damage was 1000, you would then be hitting for 13,080. Now you add on your melee damage boost of 15%, so that would take you from 1308 up to 1323 as your multiplier. That takes you to 13,230, which is an overall gain of 150 damage. Now because her stat is on the higher side, it means the overall effective or net gain actually comes out as lower. It's the same amount you're gaining, but overall it seems to be lower the higher your stat is. So in this instance it would be 1.14. We'll look at our range damage, and the reason I'm breaking it down in as much detail for melee and range is so that you can see that the higher or lower your stat is, the more the net gain actually is. So again, we're basing it on 1000 damage. You've then got a multiplier of 671, so that will do 6,710. If we add on the 15%, that means your attack will be doing 6,860. Once again, that's an increase of 150 damage, but your percent gain is actually higher because the stat that it's boosting is actually lower. I hope you're following me with that. It's the best way I can actually explain it. Onto heroic damage. This is something that came out really bad on Hulk when I done it. It came out at 0.08%, but that's because I run a Valor Hulk build and he has about 4,000 or 5,000 Valor, so that's the reason why that's so low, in case anyone was wondering from the last video. But with this one here, we're going for 1,000 base damage again, multiplying it by 1,219. I'll jump forward a little bit because I think you'll probably get an idea of it, but that would take your multiplier with the extra 15% boost to 1,234, meaning you're doing 12,340 damage. I'm struggling here, and that's an extra 150 damage again. So in this instance, because the stat is on the higher side, it's coming out at 1.23 effective gain. So what you want to take from all that is that the higher the stat you have, the lower the effective or net gain, and the lower it is, the higher the increase will actually appear to be. Now let's jump into tactical. Things could get a bit more easier from here because we've got a lot of flat bonuses. Crit damage is something I really struggled with, and I still struggle with it, but you've got the math here. I won't actually run over the full math. What I'll say is the damage numbers, the way this worked out on the example we're using, is that the overall damage gain would be 250 damage, which you should be getting 25% extra crit damage, and you do, but the effective gain is 12.25%, and this is another one that I believe the higher your actual crit damage rating, the more that's added on, the lower the effective gain is. If anyone wants to explain how crit damage works a bit better in the comments below, feel free to do it, because I still fully don't have a grasp on this one here. We then have your crit chance, flat boost 5%, nice and easy. At last we're on to these. You've got your status and your stun damage boost, that's a flat 10%. That's only boosting how quickly you actually build up the status bar on enemies. Really hard to actually track to see if that's working because the bar is so small, so it won't affect your damage, but it should make you actually apply your status and stun to enemies quicker. Moving on to utility, we have the star of the show here, if this isn't spoiling too much for the next infographic. Heroic charge rate, a flat 12.5% gain, beats everything else. This is what everything else should actually be tuned to be relatively in line with this. You've got your perk chance boost, complicated one, and that when you add on your 15%, it adds on to your stat sheet, but it then has to interact with your actual perks, so you're not getting the full 15% from it. You've got your status resistance boost, that's a flat 10% gain. I think that's practically impossible to actually test if that's working or not. You've got the defensive tree, which is your maximum willpower. Once we got to this point, I was starting to lose the will to live a little bit, so the math in this is probably really pretty simplistic, but basically with Kamala Khan, so the boost of 20% would take me from 18,059 to 18,349. We don't know the base numbers for this, so it's really hard to calculate, but essentially 20% is coming out at something more like 1.6% gain, making it completely pointless. You then have your defense boost, which is a flat 5% gain, and then you have willpower recovery, which is a flat 25% gain. Again, impossible to actually calculate that. So that's all the math there. Hopefully that's helped you understand it a bit more and it's not just made the situation more complicated. Let's go in, let's look at the infographic where everything's a whole lot easier now. So here we go, this is what I'm a lot more comfortable with myself, using stars from 1 to 5 rather than all those numbers. So I've basically done this sort of snapshot, you can see which nodes are actually worth investing in. As mentioned earlier on in the video, 75% of the nodes are near enough complete garbage, they need to be tuned up. So if we start with the combat box, your melee, your ranged and heroic are all complete and utter garbage, they're 1 star, you do not want to invest in them, which absolutely insane. I know in previous videos I said you did want to invest in them, and I apologise for that. That was based on information the developers gave me and how we all believe the system to work, to be honest, at that point. But yeah, they're all garbage, you don't want to use any of them. You've then got your tactical tree. Your crit damage works nice, it's not 5 stars because the more you have the less gains you're getting, so that's 4 star, still very good, you want to invest in this. Your flat 5% crit chance, of course if you're on a character where you can hit 100% crit easy, then there's no value in it, but if you're on a character where you can still gain from that 5%, then that's 5 star, you would want to actually go all the way down with that. You've got your status and your stun damage, which can be useful, so this one here is a 2 star. You've then got your heroic charge rate, so that's really up there with the flat crit chance. This one is your 5 star for this. This one is absolutely great and it affects all your heroics as well. You've got your perk chance, because it's not a flat 15%, it has to multiply again before it adds on to the stat, and it works out, I think it maybe works out it depends really, to be honest. If your perk chance is lower, you get less from it. So this is different from the other ones. If your perk chance is higher, you get more from it. So if you've got a really high perk chance, then what you want to do is probably bump this up a little bit. If you've got a low perk chance, then bump it down. So that's why it's sitting with 3 stars in the middle. Your status resistance, an extra 10%, that's garbage, to be honest. That's 1 star. Max willpower, that's 1 star, that's garbage. Fortification defense, which is something that we all thought was pretty underwhelming at first because the other nodes are so poor. This is actually a 3 star node. And then you've got your willpower recovery. So just to break it down very quickly, the 3 ones that I would recommend going for, and after that just really ignore the champion system and let it come when it does, and then go for the higher star rated ones. But the 3 ones you want to aim for, go for your heroic charge rate, and then go for your crit chance, and then go for your crit damage as well. Just about everything else, you don't need to sweat it. So let me finish up now with my overall thoughts. So we'll try and summarise this quickly here because this video ran much longer than I expected it to be. I've tried to be as concise as possible, but yeah, it's really going on here. So just to run over it all then, and we touched on this at the beginning, then the system is a lot worse than we were led to believe, and I personally feel that it's fair enough to say that we've actually been misled over how this system would work. It's massively disappointing that's the case. We need to have a respec option put in ASAP because so many people have actually invested in nodes that once the maths come out, once they've actually been upfront about the math, the nodes just aren't worthwhile investing in at all. So many of the nodes are unbalanced. As I mentioned, you've got about 75% of the nodes you could essentially just ignore. And what that means is there's no build variety regardless of the build that you're running. You really always want to go for the same 3 nodes, so massively disappointing in that respect. In regards to solutions, I don't have a great deal because ultimately Crystal Dynamics has developers that get paid a lot of money that should be coming up with these solutions. But solutions from speaking to people on my Discord, simple stuff they were coming up with is, for example, rather than your 3% that was adding on to the base multiplier, if it was a flat 5%, a flat 1% and 5% overall that you actually get, that would actually be a decent amount. It wouldn't be too much that you feel that you had to actually use the champion system. It would be enough, certainly, as an incentive. So I'm actually going to wind up there before my head potentially explodes trying to explain all this. I hope all this has been useful. If it has, leave a comment below. And yeah, thanks for tuning in to this one. If you made it to the end, well done, and I'll see you all again soon.